Sit back, relax, and join William and Lee on their journey through the strange and mysterious world.
Tonight we have a very interesting guest. We're going to be chatting to Burt from the Freemason. It's the Freemasons in Joburg, Burt.
Well, we are in Johannesburg, in Pretoria, but obviously there's hardly a city or a town that hasn't got a lodge.
Okay, cool. Tell us about Freemasonry. I mean, where did it begin? What was the ideals behind it? How did you begin in it? What was your pathway to get to Freemasonry? What happened?
Look, the history is lost in the mist of time. There's various mysteries, various histories. Some claim the Commercine builders, others claim the Knights Templars, the Essenes, Euclid. Others claim it's a continuation of the Egyptian mystery schools or the Greek mystery schools. And for each of those, there's been a lot of research and books written on it. And each of them has got data and confirming data that it would make a case that that's where it starts.
Okay.
One of the more recent discoveries, researched by two excellent researchers, Lomas and Knight, trace it back to the Knights Templars when they fled persecution by the Pope, and a part of their fleet landed up in Scotland, where Bruce, King of Scots, were then reigning. And they arrived at a time when the Battle of Bannockburn was in progress. The Scots were heavily outnumbered, about 6-1, by King Edward's troops. And these knights in black without any insignia, so the story goes, which is obviously very strange and very unconventional, joined the fray, won the battle of a day, giving the Scots another 300 years of freedom. So, as a gesture of appreciation and to protect the Knights Templars from persecution, he formed the Order of the Rose and Cross. That is now King Bruce, King of Scotland. The documentation is all available in the royal palaces and the state archive, so it's meticulously been researched. And also on the battlefield of Bannockburn, there's many Templar graves with both insignia of Masonry and Knights Templars. So this is one of the histories that's been thoroughly researched and proven. I think the Battle of Bannockburn was around about 1312, 1314, around that time. Okay. So that is the ancient one. The modern ones, of course, stems back a little bit later. The first Grand Lodge of England in 1717, which is basically the mother Grand Lodge of virtually all other Grand Orients over the world.
Okay. If I recall correctly, the knights actually fled Spain. I think the king had gone into some debt, and he was trying to get the riches that the Knights Templar had at the time. And I think they tortured the Grand Master at the time. I think they burnt his feet, and I think they eventually killed him, if I can recall correctly.
You're quite correct, but it was France. It was King Philip V of France who fell in debt, and he owed the millions to the Templars. He couldn't get out of debt, and he also coveted their gold. But in the event all the ships with the riches sailed, many of them were tortured, and under torture, obviously admitted to the false accusations that once they recovered, they withdrew their confessions, and then they were burned at the stake for them, inclusive of a Grand Master, Jacques de Molyneux.
Yeah. And is that where the Friday the 13th comes from?
Yes. While burning at the stake, he cursed both the Pope and King Philip, and he said that he'll see them before the judgment tree, before the year's over. And both of them died very strange deaths before that year was over. In fact, a couple of months after James de Molyneux himself expired.
Yeah, that I remember that. I recall that story.
The church where the Pope was lying in state so that the faithful could pay homage to him was struck by lightning and burned down, and he himself were burned to ashes, much like the Grand Master that he had, James de Molyneux, that he had sentenced to death. What is interesting, in 2002, they discovered documents in the Vatican. A lay librarian who's not a Catholic discovered and made photostats and smuggled it out. And the Pope had actually exonerated them. And this book is public available. Yeah, I can't get on the name of the document at the moment, but it's freely available. The whole in the photostat shows the Pope's handwriting when he discovered that he was duped by Philip the Fair.
Okay, so exonerated the Knights Templar.
That's correct.
Yeah, because it was weird, because I mean, they fought for the Pope. It's just like, you know, when somebody's fighting for you and then somebody goes up against you, it's somebody that you trusted. That's sad.
Not only that, but they were the most prestigious order, perhaps in all of Christianity. They reported only to the Pope. They were the first time in history that you had clerical warriors or warrior knights, and they had a fearsome reputation. They virtually never lost a battle. They were not allowed to retreat unless they were outnumbered 7-1. And we're also thankful for them, or indebted to them, for the Magna Carta. In England, the barons were upset by the abuse of power by King John and his predecessors. So they wrote a document that the king had to sign, and it was enforced by the Knights Templars, who stormed the colours of King John. And because of their reputation, the guards were so afraid they just threw open the gates, as the story goes. And they camped in his castle. And for 7 days, this argument went on until he eventually relented and signed the Magna Carta, which for 800 years has been the legal framework of virtually all Western countries. That's the document that ensures that people have a fair trial, that there is, and judged by his peers, that nobody is arrested without due course and not imprisoned without a fair hearing, etc., etc. It basically forms the legal framework, as I said, of Western civilization.
All right, that's pretty interesting. The Knights Templar as well, they, if I recall correctly, they were also in different sects. I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Hospitallers, they were also part of the Knights Templar, but they were the healers. But they could also fight. I mean, don't take it away from them. They were heavy knights as well, but they were more the healers. And that's kind of where we get our hospital from nowadays.
Yeah, St. John's is the Hospitallers, but they were not the same order. They had different leaders. They coexisted. And in fact, many of the riches of the castles and the huge amount of lands that were bequeathed to the Knights Templars.
Yeah,
they were the national heroes of the time, because many of the royalty, when they didn't have any descendants or people to inherit, just transferred castles and land, agricultural holdings to the Templars.
okay.
So after their demise of the order, much of those were transferred to Hospitallers.
They were the first banks, weren't they? If somebody wanted to travel to the Holy Land, they would pay almost like toll fees to the knights to keep them, when on the roads to the Holy Land, and they would kind of swap over at certain points. So that they were like the first bank. Yeah, first credit card.
Because all the temples kept money, and then they would be able to, sorry, Burt will tell it.
Well, basically, they had a piece of wood, if you can call it a wood. Imagine in your mind a ruler. And this was a coded stick, like we use a credit card, as the gentleman said.
Yeah.
And then they would put a code on it, and that code would indicate how much money has been deposited, say, before the pilgrim left France. And as he arrived in Joppa, on the shores of Israel, he would go to one of the Templar monasteries there, give in his, let's call it a credit card, or the credit stick in this instance, and they would read out determine how much he had. He would withdraw, and they would change the code and say, okay, This is now the rest of a deposit left. And he could travel. And the whole idea was because there were tremendous amount of robbers around them. And this is why the Knights Templars were initially formed, to protect pilgrims on the pilgrimage to the Holy Land once it was returned to Christianity.
Right.
So this prevented them from being killed for any money they might have carried on them.
So now, what are the main teachings now of the Masonic?
Okay, that is a very difficult question. Let's compare it, and you can't really get the essence unless you compare it.
Yeah.
How many churches are there, or not churches, denominations in Christianity, and just
lots.
in Protestantism? Yeah, about 2,000.
Yeah.
At least 2,000. So in Masonry, we've got at least 134 Grand Lodges. And a Grand Lodge is the parliament for that jurisdictions, be it Italian Freemasons or French Freemasons, Irish, whatever nationality. They've got their Grand Lodge.
Okay.
And no single person can speak for Freemasonry, because each of those countries, like no prime minister can speak for another country. So that's not a question. What one can say is that there is a divide between Anglo-American Masonry and Continental Masonry. Continental Masonry originated in France, with Belgium, Italy, and those countries involved. And there's two different focal points. The current focal point since 1717 of a new revived Masonry, as we know it today, in the Anglo-American group, or shall we just call it the Anglo-Freemasonry, is to make good men better. It's basically moral and ethical teachings, self-development, and develop any person to its absolute fullest capability. And if you see what that has achieved in terms of their heritage to humanity, and the amount of, or a number of Freemasons that were allotted, scientists that were allotted, for instance, Nobel Prizes, they're out of all proportion to the percentage of people that are Masons. Also, what they've done for the world. 32 countries own their freedom for Masonic freedom fighters. Let's start at America, George Washington, England, Sir Winston Churchill, Mazarek for Hungary, Garibaldi, the father of Italy. So definitely no other organization in the history of mankind has done so much for the freedom of nations.
Sorry, but these are all Freemasons. These are all active Freemasons.
Yes, every one of those names that I mentioned. Perhaps the most sterling example, when Europe was overrun by the Nazi and fascist hordes of Hitler and Mussolini, the King of England put out a call to arms. Only 17 nations responded. 17 of those nations that responded to the call of arms were headed by Freemasons, either as kings, princes, prime ministers, or presidents. That in itself should be telling. Okay, eventually 23 countries should join there. And obviously you now have these 23 air forces, navies, armies, special forces, and it takes literally a super mentality to be able to control and coordinate them. Amongst those nations, the 23 nations, they chose 4 Supreme Allied Commanders. The first one was Eisenhower, a Freemason. He was followed up by Sir Henry Wilson, a Brit, a Freemason, and Lord Mountbatten of Burma, head of all British Freemasons and also Admiral of the Fleet. Those were the leaders, the military leaders, that brought peace and subdued the forces that wanted to form a new world order in that stage, which would have been a tyrannical order.
So am I safe to say that Freemasonry is more of a governing? So it sounds like it's people that are trying to perhaps run presidencies or governments or countries better, as you were saying earlier, to make people better. But it's more not religious, more of a governing type of order, if that makes sense.
No, not what. Okay, I'm so glad you asked this question, because it leads to a final answer.
Yeah.
A part of our obligations a Mason takes is to serve humanity. Now, we've only spoken about the Anglo group. We're making good men better and making good men through that, charity especially. The French and the continental Freemasons focuses on building the temple of humanity. So that's a spiritual temple and improving the spiritual side of humanity. And they don't concentrate so much on the material charity aspect. Now, coming back to that, once you start serving humanity and through the training, because it's a philosophical organization, it's in no way a religious organization, although you have to be religious to become a Mason.
Can it be any religion, or is it just?
Yeah, I think it can be any religion. Yeah.
Look, in one of the Grand Secretaries of the United Grand Lodge of England puts it very well. He says that when men come together, and this question is asked, do you believe in a creator of a universe? You believe that there's a divine control and that the universe was created by divinity? If the answer is yes, regardless of your religion, we're halfway there. You believe in the existence of a soul? Yes. Thirdly, taking these two together, do you, Holy Scripture, whatever it may be, the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, the Dhammapada of the Buddhists, whatever it is, teach you to serve your community? Yes. Okay, then let's forget all politics, let's forget all religion and get down to the job and serve our communities. And to give you some examples there, Dr. Jonas, who developed the first vaccine for polio, he spent 7 years of his life doing so. That vaccine eradicated polio until Bill Gates had reinstated it. And he gave it to humanity for $1.
Yeah.
So there was no
cost.
There was no profit involved. Jenner, a Freemason, who developed the first vaccine. And by developing the first vaccine, he saved more lives than any combined scientist before or after him to this day. Because, as you know, vaccines then eradicated numerous illnesses around the world.
Yeah.
So this is the type of thing that happens. And it is obviously that people with that mentality will stand out, will become leaders, and be voted into power. Remember that only 1 out of every 2,500 people is a Mason, statistically speaking. So it's impossible for them to vote each other in. And it's not something you often hear, yes, they penetrate this and that and the other. It's like somebody saying the organization has penetrated the athletes of Olympics. You get there because you're one of the best in your field. That's why you are elected to an Olympics team. You can't penetrate it by politics. And South Africa is perhaps one of the biggest examples. During the occupation of the Cape, when certain parts of the population decided on the Great Trek to move out, they elected a governor of all the treks to oversee the numerous treks that were going. Piet Retief, he happened to be a Freemason. About 7/8 of all the other leaders elected at random through the people in the community, 1 out of every 2,500 were Freemasons. Then we had Blood River, the hero of Blood River, Andres Pretorius, a Freemason.
Yeah.
The person who wrote the Covenant, Sarel Sillier, Freemason. In the Anglo-Boer War, virtually all the generals, Christian de Wet, Kane, etc., were all Freemasons. So it's very much the same in my mind as a person going to, say, a sports school, where they specialize in training or developing sportsmen of Olympic caliber. They have a right diet, they have a right exercise, they have a right mentality, they learn about the sciences that enhance their sport. And then it's not a surprise when they come out on top. It was another big Mason, Theodore Roosevelt, that says to educate a person alone without teaching him morality is to develop a menace to society. So morality and ethics is one of the cardinal things that Masonry teaches its members. I hope that answers part of your question.
Yeah, no, 100%.
But just with the people say it's a secret society and they got secrets and the all of that. Can you explain that? Is there kind of like some kind of esoteric kind of thing that people are learning there that, maybe some kind of mysticism or some kind of getting special abilities that can put them above other people? Like, why is there all of this mystique around it being like a secret society and all of that?
Okay, this coin has got two sides. One is the practical side. Much of what Freemasons have is based on the medieval Masons that built the huge cathedrals. And those cathedrals were built by the secret that the Knights Templars founded when they were stationed underneath the Temple of Solomon during the Crusades. And when they excavated under that and they found certain secrets, it's still in debate whatever they found, but certainly some of the things they found were connected to sacred geometry. And from that, immediately after they went back to France, they built these huge 84 cathedrals over all of Europe. One of them, the Cathedral of Chartres, being the highest building in the world for almost 400 years, even higher than the Pyramid of Cheops. Now, for the Middle Ages, where you had buildings 2 or 3 or 4 stories, suddenly these huge aspects, certainly a certain knowledge must have been discovered. That's number one. The second aspect is these were built by Masons. And the Masons of that time, you must remember that perhaps 1 or 2% of your population were illiterate, perhaps the kings, the clergy, but a minute personality. And in building such a huge edifice, we think of Mason only as a person who hews stone, but to build those cathedrals, you have skills like a structural engineer, like a civil engineer, an architect, and another 12, 15 variations that goes into that construction. So there's various levels of skills and there's various levels of proficiency in those skills. They didn't have universities or colleges or diplomas. All that were conveyed by handshakes and putting the fingers on different parts of the other person's hand. Masons, one of the explanations why they were called Freemasons, and there are other explanations as well, is the fact that they were the only people that were allowed to travel freely over borders. Remember, this was the day of serfs, and every person born was born into serfdom to serve a certain lord or other high-ranking official, and they couldn't even leave his estate. They were literally serfs and almost like slaves. Masons were exempt from that, so that when a building is finished and they had to go to another country, they could travel freely, and they could, to the project manager, if you want to call him that, the master mason, supervising there by means of a handshake and a hand grip, give their experience as well as their status and their skills, very much like you would today take your CV.
Okay, well, is that all through a handshake? You could determine all that?
That's all through a handshake.
Really?
That's
okay.
right.
That's actually
grips and tokens.
Okay.
So carry on there, Burt, because I remember you when you were explaining this to me, or when we met and I was filming you the other day. Yeah, just carry on elaborating there and the whole secrecy thing.
Yeah, that is part of it. Remember also that to enter their lodges, which is their place of work, you had to have a password. Much like many companies have these ID cards that you have to swipe to get in. So what's the difference? Most people didn't have a technology, they had a password. Today you have an identification card that you swipe to get into your workplace. Secondly, their skills determined, obviously, their salary. So much as you have a PIN number today for your bank, it was the same type of privacy. It sounds very salacious to talk about this, so-called secrecy, where in effect it's basically confidentiality. I think too much is made of the so-called secrecy. In comparison, in South Africa, you've got both your constitution and the Bill of Rights protecting your privacy, so your own secrecy. You've got at least 9 pieces of legislation. You've got Post Office Act, Telkom Act, Interception of Electronic Conversations Act, etc., etc. At least 9 of them protecting your secrecy. And people don't go overboard by that. You've got the POPI Act, Protection of Private Information, which goes as far, most probably that the POPI Act protects any document that would give your eye color, your hair color, your fingerprints, your sexual preferences, your political preferences. It goes 10 times further, but it's not salacious, so the media don't write about it.
But then also, Bert, you wrapped it up so nicely that when I was interviewing the other day, yeah, you said that they got taken to court, and then they won the Freemasons or one of the sects or whatever sects, and the judge said it's not not a secret organization, but more of an organization of secrets. Or sorry, I'm probably destroying it here. I'd rather you say it.
No, you're almost there. You've got most of it right. The government of Italy discriminated against Freemasons and said because of the secrecy, if you want to call it that, they're exempt from certain positions and they may not apply, especially in the judiciary. So they took the government of Italy to court, to the European court. And the European court gave a landmark decision and said, but the evidence is there. They have secrets, but they're not a secret society. I'll give you an example. Yeah, and just like any other trade organization or NGO on their privacy, there was an article in the Guardian and Mail in Pretoria about 2 years ago when they had one of these very sensational front pieces on the Guardian Mail. They discovered or found out that 2 prominent Masons in the DA, in the city council, were Masons, and the heading was transparency and secrecy doesn't mix. So I wrote to the editor, and he was kind enough to publish most of my letter, and I explained to him where this comes from. Also that there was a parliamentary inquiry in South Africa, charges laid by the neighbor Dutch Reformed Church, and the government had to look into it. And they appointed a senior judge, Judge Burt, and all the evidence that they could get from all the various South African intelligence services, Reserve Bank intelligence, crime intelligence, military intelligence, gave them a clear bill of health. So they were exonerated of all the church's accusations. But the interesting thing was the church failed to answer a summons to give evidence. They would not give any evidence on which they could be faulted. So for me, it harks back to the Middle Ages when you only needed to call a person a witch, and then he was burned at the stake. You didn't need any other evidence.
Well, it's still like that. Yeah, it's exactly like that. I mean, even on Twitter and Facebook and everywhere. I mean, even in my life at the moment with with certain people.
Yeah.
But
and I just finished one item here of Mail and Guardian. I also invited the editor of Mail and Guardian that if he would invite me to one of his board meetings, I would arrange an invitation to him to one of the Masonic meetings. That portion was never published, and he never came back on that. So what's the difference? But as I said, it's more sensational to make a big thing of a secrecy. Another very simple reason is when you know beforehand what a ritual is going to be, especially the initiation rituals, it loses a lot of its psychological impact. And that psychological impact is a permanent aspect. It makes a difference in your personality. It changes you. And there's a simple example. Up to a certain stage, I can't tell you exactly which year, when they did a survey or study into the personalities and the psychological makeup of astronauts, about 85% of all astronauts were Catholic, because their religious training, their ethics, their morality forms a part of your personality which you grow into. It gives a certain stability, which people of other groups did not have. Now, lately, I've started researching that, and I found 16 prominent Freemasons from Armstrong. 16 astronauts has been Freemasons. So my hypothesis is it is the ethics, the morality, and the training that they undergo that gives that stability.
So what is all this? Because, I mean, why are the Freemasons being persecuted? Online, you see, like, there's documentaries being made about they're satanic and this is satanic and they built all the churches and that's why there's no crosses on the churches and the satanic, and like the whole of America is built on Freemasonry. Washington, D.C., there's all the Masonic symbols all over Washington, and they're all just making it out to be satanic. Like, what do you think the purpose of why people are doing that?
Okay, you've asked half a dozen questions in one. Let's take them one by one. America was formed by Masons. The governors of the 13 states that initially formed the first union before they became a federation, all 13 of those governors were Masons. In fact, Texas were formed by a Mason. He led a trek like a Groot trek. Austin, William Austin, I think it was, and Pennsylvania was formed by a Mason. So this is the American history. They are also the people that obviously fought for the freedom of America when the Brits came after them and started taking over pieces of this new land and started British colonies and then imposed British taxes on the people that tried to flee it from Europe. Second aspect is that when Kennedy came into power, he had a study done to determine what makes a good president. And the Society of American Historians and Political Scientists got together and they grew up a framework of capabilities and what those presidents' heritage was. And 8 out of the 10 best presidents in American history to this day were Freemasons. So that, to some extent, I think counters this argument. We've already said that 32 countries' freedom were fought for by Masons. Now look at the other side of the coin. Hitler killed somewhere between 62 and 80,000 Freemasons because they stood up to him. They stood up to tyranny and a one-party state. Mussolini followed suit. There's no numbers, but it's most probably almost the same. General Franco, the big authoritarian leader, was also a dictator of Spain. On one day, he had 10,000 Masons killed to try and wipe out Masonry. Throughout the ages, Masonry has been the organization that stood up for freedom of thought, freedom of religion, and freedom of consciousness. So very obviously, they are going to be targeted, but very much more subtle today. So it's the neocons and the extreme far left and new liberals that is fighting and breaking down or attempting to break down the reputation of Masons. So that's from that side. Pending the second part of your question that they're Satanists, then I can only ask, there's a saying that you can lead a horse to the water, but you can't force him to drink. Times has changed a bit. You can lead a man into education, even a postgraduate, but you can't force him to think. So let's think about the following items. Why has the coat of arms of the Grand Lodge of England got the Ark of the Covenant on it, a religious symbol? Why is the patron saints of Freemasonry St. John the Baptist and St. John the Evangelist? I'll just ask 4 or 5 questions. Number 3, why must a Bible be open for a lodge to be regular, official, and be acknowledged? If there's no open Bible open during all of the procedures, all of those procedures are null and void and considered illegal. Fourthly, why is Christian countries such as Sweden and Denmark, you've got to be a member of a Lutheran church before you can be a Freemason? In the York Rite, which is a parallel rite to the well-known Scottish Rite, why then does York Rite Freemasons in the Templars degree have to take an oath to defend Christianity? Any person that can answer those hopefully will see where the antagonists come from.
So let me just ask a question quickly, because I had a different idea of why there are no crosses on the temples built, because my opinion was that it's not supposed to be representing one religion. It's supposed to be representing all. So, you can't just have cross, because that would just say you're a Christian organization. It should be whether you're a Catholic, whether you're Muslim. That was my thought of why there's no cross, because it doesn't represent one religion.
Correct.
Okay, cool. But now the things now I'm wondering about now is, you're saying that when the guys are having their, or the rituals, whatever, during the process, that the Bible is around. But does that not now mean, and you're saying that's they've got to defend Christianity, but does that not now mean that they're a Christian organization?
No. In a Christian country, Look, at his initiation, the ritual is the same, whatever country you are. You have to believe in a supreme being, the creator of the universe. Secondly, you are in charge to follow the beliefs of your own religion, whatever that may be. If a lodge has both a Hindu member, and it very often happens, I've been seen a lodge where there've been both Hindus, a single Muslim, Russian Orthodox, Never Dutch Reformed, Church of England. Then for each of those persons to have his obligation valid, the Holy Scripture of his own religion must lie open next to the Bible, be it the Holy Quran or the Bhagavad Gita or whatever. Freemason is a philosophy, but the oaths are taken. Look, at a court of law is not a church or a religious institution, yet you take an oath.
But I was wondering, Burt, would that not cause conflict? Because, and just hear me out, so my thoughts on this. So say in the same lodge, we've got a few Christian guys and say a few Muslim guys. And now when you're doing one of your oaths as a Christian side, one of your oaths is to defend Christianity. The Muslim guys, one of their oaths is to defend Islam. But another two of them, the conflict between the two is always, that's great. So how does that work? Because in the same lodge, you've got guys that are there to defend Islam, and then you've got guys to defend the Christian faith. How does it work? Because now they're backing each side, so they are against each other, if that makes any sense.
It's a very logical question. The easy answer to that is they cannot be allowed to that specific degree, and they will not apply for that specific degree. Just as Jews, for instance, will not apply for the 18th degree, which is a purely Christian degree and celebrates the resurrection. Okay. So you just stay away from those. What happens in the Defense Force, for instance? I started my young life in the Navy, and you've got a parade, and after the parade, you've got a church parade, and the Jews goes to their meeting, and the Church of England to theirs, and the Afrikaners to theirs, and afterwards you work together again. So there's no animosity. And two items on absolutely taboo to be discussed in any lodge or even in the festival table after the meal that you have after a lodge. And that is politics and religion. Okay. It's not the same. For instance, compare it with Microsoft, where you might have 7 or 8 different religions in a universal office. And these people work shoulder to shoulder, be it IT or whatever they do, and religion is not an issue.
So, Burt, I just want to talk a little bit about the degrees now, because there's 3 main degrees, but there's also some have 33 degrees, and like there's the main masonry, and there's also fringe masonry. If you could maybe just talk about that, and also what is a degree and how do you get a degree? Is it like you get like a badge, like a officer gets a badge, or like what are you learning in each degree? Or I mean, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion in the media about this. Basic Freemasonry has only got 3 degrees, regardless of what the media says. And it's based on, once again, on the stonemasons. You've got an entered apprentice, and the entered apprentice goes through initiation, and he does a period of training, and then he is allowed to apply to do an examination to go to a higher degree. The examination is open. Every single person in the lodge is allowed to ask him questions, and he's got to be able to answer that with 100% clarity virtually, or pass rate. And then he becomes a fellow craft. The basic first degree is about morality and ethics. In the fellow craft, he's enjoined to study the secrets of nature, sciences, the 7 liberal sciences, arithmetic, geometry, music, philosophy, etc. And then at the end of that period, he can apply for examination, and if he successfully becomes a master mason. So those are the 3 degrees, and it's called the Blue Masonry. All the others are concordant degrees. Other organizations with their own head offices, their own rituals, etc., they are side degrees. And they say that it's less than 10% of Masons that opt to go into the other degrees. That is in the Anglo system. In the continental system, that percentage is much higher. And there you've got, for instance, the Scottish Rite, that's got 33 degrees. And you've got the Yorkite that's got about 17. You've got the Royal Order of Scotland that's got about 8. In fact, you've got 123 different rites. You've got the Swedish rite, etc. All of them separate, but all of them working basically starting off with a basic 3: entered apprentice, fellowcraft, and master mason. Master mason is basically the highest degree that you have. To give one example, you can have a 32nd degree person and he visits a lodge, say his mother lodge, and the person in the chair, the reigning master of that lodge, may only be a master mason, which is the 3rd degree. That visitor of 32nd degree is subordinate to that master, and he can only speak with the master's permission, he can only ask questions to the master's permission, or for instance, to leave the ceremony, to do so with master's permission. So that enforces the idea that the 3rd degree is the highest degree in Freemasonry, and the remainder are basically side degrees of concordant organizations. And there's many of them. There's the female orders, such as the Eastern Star.
So the females and males can't mix. They've got their own lodges.
Yeah, you've got the pure female lodge, female Masons. There's 2 of those orders starting in England. But then you've got co-masonry that comes from the continent, and which is also over the world. There's about 59 countries that have co-masons, which is male and female.
Okay.
So, but what do they learn in these other degrees? What can you give an examples? Because you did say that you learned the crucifixion in the 12th degree. I don't know if that's in the same 33 or whatever other degrees.
No, that's part of the side degrees.
Yeah, the side degrees, and this once again put a huge question mark on the people that believe they're satanic. Most of the Scottish rite degrees, if not all, say about 90%, would be based on biblical events. For instance, the Royal Ark Mariners are based on the flood, Noah, the deluge, and the moral issues that can be learned, or lessons taken from that. Some of the other degrees is about the return of the exile from Babylon when King Cyrus defeated Nebuchadnezzar and they were allowed to return to Israel. Another degree would cover the rebuilding of a temple and everything that goes with that. So those are the topics, and it begs the question to what extent that can be satanic.
Yeah, I think it's just ignorance, man. That's what it is.
I also heard that the 33 degrees are actually the bones in your spine, the vertebrae. They represent that, or 33, and then the 34th one's your head or something. Is that true? And even what does that mean? Is that like, why would it represent that?
Yes, look, there's as many interpretations as there are members, because Masonry hasn't got a fixed dogma that say, this is it. This is why it's taught in symbol and allegory. There's a great understanding these days that our current method of teaching people, just give them some facts that they can learn by rote and then answer like whatever, does not really lead to insight if you don't earn the insight by your own volition and by your own thinking, your own contemplation, and getting to your own answer. And internet is an example of that, a huge example. You find the answers there, and people can't do the sums, how to get to the answer. They don't have a context, they don't have a background, they only have an answer, and they don't have to think, they don't contemplate it. The type of teaching, allegories and symbol, it comes from the old, not only from the old mystery schools, but it was the way that Pythagoras, Socrates, Aristotle, and the like taught in those days. Even in the New Testament, there's a text that says, and Jesus taught by parables, and without parables taught he nothing, because you are forced to come to your own conclusion. And some people will come to the conclusion, yes, there is this likeness to the 33 vertebrae. I've heard people say, yes, it's a comparison to the 33 years of a Christ's life. There's many comparisons that you may have. And because no single person can speak for Masonry, it is the individual's insight and what he makes of it and the value that he gets out of it.
Burt, let me ask you a question regarding Freemasonry, kind of going back a little bit in time. Is it true that the Freemasonry then it kind of ran in the family, so it would go to the son, to the next son? And how does it work nowadays? I mean, if somebody wanted to become a Freemason, what would they do? Would they just need to approach a lodge and kind of do the tests that you were mentioning earlier?
Certain countries, especially like America, where there's a grandfather, and if his sons is impressed enough with him, they become Masons, and the grandsons, etc. And I know in America, I've studied there, and you talk with fellow students, etc. And you see this often in Masonic either magazines that's open to the public, or especially on videos, that young people feel they would so much like to follow in the footsteps of their predecessors, fathers, grandfathers. But it's seemingly not so strong in other countries. It's not hereditary. What is a fact is that there's a special ceremony that a Mason can take his youngest child, it must be before the age of 3 or 4, and he's made a Lewis, and he has been allowed, because of the ceremony and because of a parent being a Mason, to come in at a much younger age than the normal age of 21, perhaps at 18. And that is the only advantage that having a Masonic parent has.
Okay. And then how does one become one now? You can just approach.
You approach a lodge and you express your interest. This also varies. In many lodges, you must be posed by at least 2 members that know that person for a considerable time.
Okay.
Then once the request is formalized and they give an application form, the application form goes before council. The council appoint people to, well, basically in some lodges they go so far as to investigate him. Obviously, he must be of sound morals, he must have a good standing in the community, he must not have a criminal record, etc., etc. Some lodges even goes to his family and his house. They want to see the living conditions, have to find out, will the wife be happy, will the parents be happy, because they can't cause strife because of, as you've mentioned, they're supposed to be baby killers and blood drinkers and Satanists and what have you. No, it's more than, I made a list, and there's not a single figure or number of the alphabet that you cannot name. Arsonists, baby killers, criminals, delusionists, etc. Right down to Z. Members of a mafia. There's not a letter that you can't blame them for.
Yeah.
Then after that, there's interviews, and if the interviewers find him suitable, they will make a recommendation, and then he's invited.
Okay. Cool. But now, what happens if you don't know anybody in the lodges? It would go against him then if he approaches and there's no one that can actually stand for him to say, look, we know the guy. Yes, he's of moral standing. He's kind of almost like a blank slate because no one knows who the guy is. So would that person not be able to get in?
No, I wouldn't say so. Look, up till recently, there's very few communities that hasn't got lodges.
Yeah.
You take a city like Singapore, they've got 77 lodges in that one small island city.
Okay.
Pretoria's got a minimum of 24 different lodges, Irish, English, etc. And it's normally people that would invite you. Up till recently, you couldn't ask to join, you had to be invited.
Okay.
But things has changed, and it would be people either in your profession, your occupation that knows you. Otherwise, as I said, you approach the lodge and they just have to do the necessary inquiries about you.
Okay.
What then happens in the lodge, after the lodge is satisfied, they send then out your petition to all the other lodges in the country or in their jurisdiction and say, this person has applied for membership. So people that knows him will give feedback, either yay or nay, and that will be taken into consideration, because when they vote for him, he must have a 100% vote. If there's only one dissent, he's not allowed to apply again for the next 2 years. And that it guarantees harmony and acceptance, and that there's no bickering in the lodge.
Okay. Yeah, that's
so, Burt, sorry, just last question, because I know I hope this one doesn't take too long, but just in terms of the Illuminati, because everybody thinks that the Freemasons were responsible for the Illuminati and all these conspiracy theories, and I know they're conspiracy theories, And they all like, they think that the Illuminati is holding the whole world. It's all the evil in the world, and it comes out of the Freemasons. But then when you read like books like The Secret History of the World by Mark Booth, which was like a New York best time seller, he said that the Illuminati infiltrated the Freemasons to actually try and break them up and make them like, and to try and weaken their beliefs and morals and stuff. And then you read other literature like that says that, you know, it brings in, or what is that guy from Germany, the guy that started the
Weishaupt.
Weishaupt, yes, from and started the Illuminati, but he was for the good, but he turned bad or something, and then it became, I don't know. I mean, there's so many different variations of the story, but can you touch on any of that?
Yeah, you're quite right. There must be at least half a dozen variations. Yeah, Weishaupt was a Bavarian. He was a professor of theology, if I believe right. It's impossible to understand them unless you've got a rather well-developed grasp of the history and the sociology of that time. The people lived in the time of serfdom. The church had an absolute grip, and nothing could be done without the church's permission. Books published, they burnt dissenters on. Look what happened to Galileo Galilei, Copernicus, Bruno, the biggest scientist of a time, well, of all times perhaps, were burned at the stake for disagreeing with the church. So against that background, where people were absolutely slaves, there's a quote by Philip the Fair, where he said to a serf, I own you. I own the shirt on your body, and if I want it, I will take it. People had no possessions, to the extent that the king...
Sounds like the what's it, the World Health Organization, what they want to do. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, the New World Order. Anyhow, so in that context, what Weishaupt tried to do was to eliminate people and to see the atrocities that were going on. And from a liberal point of view, tried to even the playing field and to uplift the masses. And obviously this didn't go down. From their position or from their perspective of taking away their power, etc., he was an outcast. So there's different perspectives on it, but you really need to understand the absolute misery that 99% of the population was living under. So that was where Weishaupt came in. He somehow knew about the Masonic order. Whether he was ever a member, I do not know. But the Masonic system and structure has withstood the test of time. There is no civilization, no other order, no other organization in the world that has existed for so long, unbroken, because of the system that they have. So the Orangeman in Ireland was using it, people in America, and he copied that system to give solidarity and solidity to the organization. He did try
to the Illuminati, you're talking about.
Yeah. But the Illuminati was banned shortly thereafter. He had to flee Bavaria. This is what the experts on it in the Royal Archives in Bavaria. I've looked at the documentary from about an hour and a half where they gave a whole exposition and the history of it. But the thought lives on, and for the illiterate, they are now the scapegoats and everything that is linked to it. I believe that it's become an umbrella term for the New World Order and for everybody else that now wants to suppress the world. But the difference is now is that in Weishaupt's time, he was trying to uplift the masses and to prevent enslavement. Today, the mission is exactly the opposite, to enslave the masses and to have an elite back in the privileged position that they had in the Middle Ages. And the Illuminati is a very good sort of umbrella term to cover all these people.
Yeah, good, man. Anything else from your side, Wolf?
No, I think I'm good. Yeah, good. Thanks, Lee. Thanks, Burt. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, it was very enlightening, man. But thanks, yeah. It answered a lot of questions, and it's it's very good to have somebody like you on that explains the whole situation. And there's not always these, because like we said earlier, people don't really know. They're going on by social media, what social media says, but hardly any. I mean, I'm sure you've come into contact where people have said they were in the Freemasons and this is what they experienced and they're satanic, but in the meantime, these guys have never been in any Freemason lodge at all. It's just for some sort of people to download and like and click on their videos.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I think the greatest thing you said was that you can take a person to university and they can teach them everything in that and get them a PhD, but you can't teach them to think for themselves. And I think that's the main problem with the whole world. As soon as you start thinking for yourself, then you get ostracized. And that's also, I mean, obviously like Copernicus and Galileo and everything like that, it just happens through history the whole time. So, yeah, just watch out for anybody that just thinks for themselves. You will get persecuted.
Yes, I think that's a very fair summary of that. What is amazing, in my research, I've come across more than 40 Masonic museums. None of them charge anything. There's even lately, I'm told about one. I've not been able to visit it, but in Mafeking. So it's there.
Oh, wow, in Mafeking.
TV stations, there's Masonic radio stations in Europe. They're on YouTube, they're on Twitter. If you go into what I found in Wikipedia, all the Masonic lodges in the world are listed. All the great temples are listed. The grand lodges are listed. So there's no lack of information, but people prefer to read something that's, salacious instead of doing the hard job of actually doing research for themselves and reading credible books by credible authors and historians. Most of the big universities in our mother languages, English, Dutch, French, etc., has got historical departments, universities that's doing research on it. And this is thorough research. It's not quasi or pseudo research because the facts are verified. Those research is freely available, but nobody wants to do or seems to have the intellectual energy or perhaps integrity to go that way.
Yeah. Okay, cool, Burt. Well, thank you so much, man, for coming on. We really had a great time with you here. And yeah, just such a world of wisdom. And yeah, appreciate your time, man.
No,
thank you for clarifying.
It was quite a pleasure, and I enjoyed speaking with you.
Yeah, thanks, Burt. Much appreciated, man. Have a good evening.
Same there.
Thanks, Burt.
Thanks.
Burt. Hey, listen, Burt, I'm still coming back to interview you again. About the Illuminati for my documentary. I still haven't put that. I still need to put that in there. So I'll see you hopefully soon.
Okay, we'll make an appointment.
Right.
Have a good evening.
You too, Burt. Thanks, man. Thanks for your time.
Yes, man.
Yeah, well, that was interesting, Bud.
Yeah, Lee. Yeah, I think it was great. He had such a great story, but I don't think we were going on a bit long, and I'm a bit tired because it's so late here, and also I'm sure he's also tired, and you. But he was trying to catch a plane somewhere to some university course or something in England, and he was on the plane, and the plane was delayed or something, and he had to catch a late flight, and he was going to be late or something, and he was on the flight there, and his connecting flight was already like cancelled because the flight was delayed.
Yeah.
And the air hostess, I'm sorry, I don't know what the male, what is the air?
Air host.
Air host. And saw he had his Masonic ring on, and he started speaking to him, and then he told the air hostess, told him his situation, like he's going to miss his lecture or his course in England because his connecting flight was he's lost his connecting flight or whatever. So, and the air hostess saw that he was a Mason from his Mason ring, and he was also a Mason. So he went and he got on he went to the pilot. I don't know how he got his connections when they were going to arrive in Heathrow to get him onto the next available flight to get him to that wherever he was going for the course, and he got there on time because another Mason saw that he was a Mason and like helped him get there.
Well, that's actually pretty cool, man. That's actually quite a nice story. Very nice.
Yeah.
Where it's kind of helping one of your brothers. No, fantastic, Will. And we will chat to you again soon. Thanks for everybody for listening again. And we'll see you next week on our next episode of Strange and Mysterious World. Cheers, Will.
Cheers, Lee.